Hey traders, welcome back to the weekly Forex Forecast. Yesterday we saw the dollar fail to follow through on that non-farm payrolls data, and as a result, this is almost certainly a near-term top in the DXY, and I would not be surprised to see this pulling back to the 104.69 in the next week or so. However, I'm not looking to short dollars. I'm only looking to use this as an opportunity to look for more buying opportunities in the dollar, and dollar long plays are my favorite opportunities going into next week. So quick look at the scores going into next week. You can see the dollar is still at the top of my list, and this is the market that with the data is saying we should be looking for long opportunities in. So I do expect a softening of the dollar. This is likely to support risk assets. I expect to see stocks also bouncing, and I do also think, just as I'm going to be looking for long dollar opportunities, I do also think next week will represent a good opportunity to short equities. However, the dollar is my number one play heading into next week, followed by not the New Zealand dollar, but the Swiss franc. Why? Because I'm only interested in risk-off setups once again. I highlighted in last week's video the risks around a volatility shock this month. And since then, we've actually had more data coming out to suggest that this could well be the case. I highlighted previously the sentiment in the VIX in the monthly time horizon is getting extreme to the downside. And the data is saying we have a 70% chance of pausing or reversing higher in the VIX over the monthly time horizon. And now we also have strong bullish sentiment coming in on the shorter time horizons. And this is the first sign of that turn which we're expecting to see in the VIX based on the monthly sentiment and the sentiment taken over longer time horizons. And it does mean once we get a softening of the dollar and we get a little bit perhaps more of a softening in the VIX, we are likely set for a new leg high in volatility. That's going to be bullish for the dollar, bearish for risk assets. And if we get that, risk off setups are going to benefit in Forex, which is why this week is a pretty special month and a pretty special week based on the data, because the risks are elevated for risk off and a volatility shock. In that case, I don't want to be going long the New Zealand dollar because of these special circumstances. Therefore, the second market I like to the long side after the US dollar is the Swiss franc once again, and a number of these worked out very nicely from last week's video. Another very important piece of data that came out, which I thought was really interesting, is the utility sector with a massive underperformance. And we haven't seen this kind of sentiment in the utilities data set since 2008. And what's really striking about the data that we've got here for utilities is the last time we saw this was not just in 2008, but it was in the October capitulation for equities that utilities had this same level of sentiment. Now, what was the time before that utilities was showing this level of sentiment and underperformance? We have to go all the way back to 2002, which of course was the end of the dot-com bear market. And the last time we saw this sentiment in utilities was July. July, for those of you who don't know, was the month that the bottom fell out of that bear market rally. It was the capitulation month. So very interesting to me that we now have utilities data coming out, which was last seen only in the capitulation months of October 2008 and July 2002. Now, that doesn't mean that we absolutely have to capitulate in stocks this month, but it's very interesting that data is coming out which is warning of the risks of that happening. It's why I'm really focused on risk off setups only in Forex heading into next week once again. So going into next week, I'm going to be focused on the dollar and the Swiss franc, primarily versus the Australian dollar, which is rock bottom of the scorecards, the pound, the euro, and also the Canadian dollar. Although the Canadian dollar is still slightly bullish to neutral in the scorecards, it does have negative momentum, and we've seen crude oil crashing, and this is going to affect the Canadian dollar through the balance of payments. It is going to add weight to the downside in the Canadian dollar. So I do like CAD shorts as well heading into next week. Okay, so let's have a look at the markets this week, starting with crude oil. Crude oil was a market that I highlighted. Although it was still trending to the upside, there was risk attached to this, and I did not want to be long crude oil last week. And look at the sell-off we had through the lower bound, highlighting last week's video, and by quite a distance. This actually is a sign of momentum. Momentum precedes price, and I would, on balance, prefer to look for shorts in crude oil because of my overall risk-off bias. So coming into this week, any pullback in this market is viewed as an opportunity to look for bearish reversals intra-week down to the 78 area. And if we hold this trend and instead of breaking through, we just hold and we hold and we pull back into the 87.50, this is the second place next week, I'd be looking for a short-term sell opportunity in crude oil. Okay, so moving on to the best Forex pairs this week, I do like the dollar pairs first and foremost, starting with Aussie dollar. We were looking for potential short-term opportunities from last week's video and we traded right into the lower bound. So coming into this week, just bear in mind, we do have US CPI on Thursday. This is likely to be a market moving event, but it's quite late in the week and there's a good chance we get opportunities in these markets before Thursday's CPI print. Any continued pullback in Aussie dollar, and you can see it's already flagging. Any continued pullback is viewed as the opportunity next week to start to look for bearish setups down to the 0.6250. And if we just hold this level here and we bounce from this trend line and we hold and we hold and we pull all the way back and we test these previous highs over here in the 0.6520, this is the second place next week. I'd be looking for a potential short in Aussie dollar. Next is pound dollar. Now this was a market highlighted as one of the best short opportunities in last week's video, and look at how this market traded down right into the max profit taking zone here. So a really nice move last week in pound dollar. Coming into this week, this is once again one of my favorite markets. So any continued pullback is simply viewed as an opportunity to look for bearish reversals, and bear in mind these may come from the CPI print itself. Any reversal to the downside would be viewed as an opportunity to look for shorts next week into the prior lows at the 1.2050. And if we hold the trend and we just continue to pull back, you can see there's a nice key area of support over here, turning resistance, breaking through resistance. If we pull back into this area, the 1.2450, it's the second place next week, and I'd only be looking for a short here or up in this area. I'd be looking for a short-term short opportunity or selling opportunity in pound dollar. Next is euro dollar, another market highlighted in last week's video to the downside. And again, look at how we just tested. These areas are on here so that when you trade into them, you have an opportunity to book profits at an extended period in the actual sell-off. So in other words, you're not booking profits, once it pulls back, you're booking them in an area where the probabilities are that you're going to struggle to pass this area in any given week, roughly with a 70% expectancy. So you trade into these areas. These are great profit taking zones in the week. So another really nice market from last week's video. Coming into this week, we've already started to pull back. So any continued pullback and correction is simply viewed as an opportunity to look for bearish setups. And any breakthrough here, I'm going to be looking down towards the 1.040. And if we hold the trend and we bounce and we continue to trend all the way up into this high over here and the 1.0760, it's the second place I'd be looking for a short-term sell opportunity in euro dollar. And the final dollar pair here highlighted in gold is US dollar CAD. We've already started to correct and consolidate. So look at this nice bull flag setting up, really strong momentum. Momentum precedes price. Any continued consolidation or pullback is viewed as an opportunity to look for bullish breakouts next week. I'm going to be looking up towards the 1.3850. And if we hold here and we trend all the way back into the 1.34750 area, you could say it's the second place next week I'd be interested in a buying opportunity in US dollar CAD. Now remember what I said at the beginning of the video, it looks like we have a near-term top in the dollar. So we're probably going to end up with some deeper corrections and maybe a test of the lower bound here. And in euro dollar, pound dollar, Aussie dollar, tests of the upper bound, because I do think we're going to get some more weakening heading into next week in the dollar. But as I said, in my opinion, that's just the opportunity to buy US dollar CAD down by the lower bound or short euro dollar, pound dollar or Aussie dollar from their upper bounds. Next is the Swiss franc pairs. Now just bear in mind, all of the markets we're looking at here would benefit in a risk-off environment. They're risk-off setups. So if we do get volatility picking up, even though I think first we're due a softening of the dollar and perhaps further softening of the VIX and volatility, I do think if we do start to see the VIX spike in the dollar rallying again, as I believe will be the case after a near-term correction in the dollar, the risk-off setups will benefit from that. And of course, if it happens sooner and the pullback in the dollar is very, very short term, then of course we will avoid being on the wrong side of anything risk-off just by focusing purely on risk-off setups. So any pullback in pound franc next week is viewed as an opportunity to start to look for bearish breakouts intra-week down to the 1.1030. Or if we hold here and we bounce all the way into the prior high over here, I would be interested in shorting this at the top of the range at the 1.1240 for a near-term selling opportunity in pound franc. Next is Euro Franc. Now this was a market highlighted to the downside in last week's video, and we did come and test right into the profit taking zone at the 0.9620. So another really nice move from last week's market. Any pullback once again is still viewed as an opportunity to look for bearish reversals in this market intra-week down to the 0.9570. And if we hold here and we just bounce into the prior high, this is going to be the second place I'd be interested in a near-term short in Euro Franc next week. Next is Aussie Franc. Now this was a market highlighted to the downside in last week's video also, and we did trade right into the profit taking zone, and that capped the move to the downside in last week. So a nice move down from last week's video. So I'm only interested in shorts. Once again, I can either be short this market or do nothing next week. Buying Aussie Franc is not an option. Any pullback in this market is viewed as another opportunity to look for bearish breakouts intra-week down to the 0.5730. And if we hold and we pull all the way back and we test the 0.5880, this is the second place next week, I'd be looking for a near-term short in Aussie Franc. And the final franc pair is CAD Franc. Any pullback in this market is viewed as an opportunity to look for bearish reversals intra-week down to the 0.6580. And if we hold here and we bounce and we pull back and perhaps we test these highs over here, there's a nice area of resistance near term. The 0.6720 is the second place next week I'd be interested in looking for short opportunities in CAD Franc. And last but not least, we have Euro Pound. Now, it's not one of my favorites because both of these markets are kind of weak, but that does allow us to kind of range trade and trade the upper and lower bounds. In a risk-off event or a volatility shock, you will see euro rallying versus the pound. Therefore, any pullback in this market next week is viewed as an opportunity to look for potential breakouts to the upside into the prior highs in the 0.8720. And if we hold here and pull all the way back, the 0.8580 is the second place I'd be looking for a near-term bounce next week to the upside in Euro Pound. Okay, so finishing up with gold and silver. Gold and silver have been good short opportunities I've been highlighting in previous videos because of that really strong score we have for the US dollar in the algorithm and in the scorecards that I've been showing you. So I do favor still, once again, shorts in gold and silver. Gold did come down, tested right into the profit taking zone. If you booked your profits here on any shorts in gold last week, that was absolutely the low in gold last week. So any pullback in this market is viewed as an opportunity next week to start to look for bearish setups and breakouts once again into the 1800 area. Or if we pull back and we just hold and we trend into the 1865, this is the second place I'd be looking for a short-term sell opportunity in gold next week. And last but not least, we have silver. Another market highlighted to the downside in last week's video, and we came through the max profit taking zone here. In fact, we did end up bouncing, kind of closing back inside this, but that was a really nice move to the downside as well last week. So coming into this week, any continued pullback is simply viewed as an opportunity to look for bearish reversals in this market. And again, I think many of these dollar pairs, and I class these as dollar pairs just because they are denominated in dollars here, but any of these dollar pairs, I do think instead of getting intra-week opportunities, the most likely is we're going to come and test these other bounds as the dollar softens for a week or so. But if we do get a breakout intra-week, I would be looking for shorts back down into the low and the 20.7 area. But if we pull back, and this would be a really nice setup in silver because we have a prior low right here and also right here. So if we pull back and we retest these lows, there's broken support, turning resistance, and at the same time we're trading right into the upper bound at the 2240, this would be a great place to look for shorts in silver next week. So that is it for me for this week, guys. As always, I hope you enjoyed today's video, and if you did, why not consider joining us in the room each day where I go through these markets and the setups that I'm personally looking at with members on a daily basis for over 75 markets in different asset classes, including stocks, bonds, Forex, and commodities.